All right. Where were you born, Manuel?
In Rowlett, Texas.
Rowlett,
Right.
Texas.
Yeah.
All right. 1945.
hmm
Born in Rowlett, Texas. What was your first memory you remember?
Gosh, when I was very small, and I'll never forget that we lived out in the country and we were really poor. Now, back then, this was years ago, remember? And I remember that there used to be a bread truck come by, a bread man, and he would leave stuff. And he left some bread and some rolls. And I thought, man, where'd this come from? You know, I'm a little kid. There by ourselves. Our parents probably out working, and we ate them. And when we got home, we got in big trouble. And I don't think I ever remember staying home by myself again. I guess I was always in the field.
Wait a minute. What were the roles for? They come from?
From the bread man, it's like the delivery man.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
gotcha.
but we ate
Okay.
the good stuff.
I never heard that story.
Yeah,
I can't
but
believe
that's
that.
really the earliest I can remember being young enough that I couldn't. I guess they didn't take us to the field because the next thing I remember when I was young is standing in the okra field, looking out there at my brothers and sisters getting on the bus to go to school, and I thought, man, I'd be glad when I get old enough to go to school, get out of here.
Well, how old were you when you started picking okra?
Well, it had to be, gosh, 4 or 5 years old.
My goodness.
They took us out in the field. We all worked, so that's the two things as earliest I can remember. I think God has a way of protecting us from bad things that happened in our lives, especially because we were so poor, and it had to be struggle the way we lived, the isolated from everybody else, just living in a country. We didn't have any transportation. Our people that we worked for had to take us everywhere, anywhere we went. And so a lot of those memories, I think, are just repressed because it was probably such a terrible thing as a young person growing up so poor and everything that I just don't remember.
Well, that's a question that also I have too. Is but I was thinking about this last night. Is that when did you know you were poor? Like a lot of people look back and they'll go, "Well, I didn't know I was poor because this is how we everybody lived around." When did you first realize the difference?
Well, the people that we work for, they would, after we get to in the fields and picking okra and everything, and they'd take it to town and they'd let me go with them. And I just saw everybody around going from, a rural little town that was hardly anything to the big city of Dallas at the market where we'd go. And I saw people, they were uh, driving nice cars. They take me to restaurants where I never, had eaten. Because our families didn't eat in restaurants.
Yeah.
We didn't, you couldn't go and buy burgers or something. When we worked in the fields, a lot of times, on the way home, we'd stop at this little general store and we'd get our, few treats that we'd get, but that was it. So everybody around us, especially after I started school, was, pretty much middle class or upper class. And so I knew from the beginning I was poor when I started school.
Oh, that's tough if everybody around you, if you're sort of thinking you didn't have indoor plumbing, right? Until you
No,
were like in high school.
right. I think I was 15 years old till we
I
got
couldn't go
indoor
on. I
plumbing.
couldn't go on. I couldn't go on. But with the people took you to, you talking about Bernice and Nellie?
Right.
Okay, we'll talk about them
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
separately. But yeah, Bernice and Nellie. How many brothers and sisters?
I had was three brothers and two sisters.
Okay, all right. And so Angel, which we'll talk about him too, fathered you. Let me get this straight. You, Philip, Ross, and Aunt Jessie after he was 60.
No, just well, me and
So Philip and
Philip and
Ross were younger.
Ross.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Aunt Jessie was before. Okay, so three boys after he was 60 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I don't know what he was thinking, but of course, Granddad, he was born in 1885.
hmm
So obviously he goes back. Old men always do. But uh, did you know anything about? I mean, when you were born, he's 60 years old, so you didn't get to
Yeah.
really know him for a few years. Did you know anything about his life before you?
No, I didn't. Of course, I have to realize that my mother was 34 years younger than he was.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I know people say, "Wow, he was 60 years old. He had three children."
Yeah.
But his wife was very
Oh
young.
yeah. Yeah.
No, gosh, I really didn't know anything. When you're poor like we were, and you work constantly to just making a living. You
Yeah.
know, my mother and daddy, my dad died in 1961,
Hmm.
and he never made more than 50 cents an hour. And we'd work out in the fields, especially when we was hoeing the okra, because you go out there and after they plant okra, then you have to come back and just like cotton, you have to thin it out.
Yeah.
And so we worked 10 hours a day. Uh, well, we worked 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then on Saturdays we just worked half a day.
Yeah.
But when you're that poor, and both my parents were illiterate, so it was tough. And my daddy would never speak English. And there again, there was a time in my life I was told that I could not speak English.
Hmm.
But when my older siblings started going to school, the teachers told my parents, said, well, they told my mother because my dad couldn't understand them probably, but they told her, do not speak Spanish to these kids. They have to learn English, and that's the truth.
Yeah. Well, no, wait a minute. If you didn't know Spanish by the time you were probably grade school, junior high, whatever. You didn't. Did you know Spanish then? Could you speak it?
No, that I was told I couldn't. I don't remember,
Oh,
but
what? How did you communicate with Angel once you got to be like teenager?
well, what they say, mother, will you ask daddy this
Oh
or
my
tell daddy?
goodness!
Because I mean, gosh, I know he'd been.
Could he really? He really couldn't understand English, or he just
Well, he
refused. I mean,
understand
come
it. He
on.
just wouldn't speak it. He was proud Mexican. That's the way those people were back then. You're
I
talking
can.
about,
I
60 something years ago.
Well, that I can. I know where my stubborn streak comes from. I've let it go, but I can see where that comes from. So you had brothers and sisters. How did they view, you think, where they came from? I've talked to Uncle Ross more than anybody um, about when he's growing up and everything, but he's more laid back and told funny stories and whatnot. I mean, you seem to remember how difficult it was. How do you think they took it? Like you said, Uncle Joe always got in fights at school, but
Yeah,
you
oh
were
yeah.
popular and you seemed to get along with
Well,
everybody.
I think that's our different personalities.
Uh,
My my brother, oldest brother Joe, he took after daddy. He had an anger management problem.
yeah,
And you're talking about living in Texas and being a Mexican. It was like being black in the South.
yeah,
Of course, people don't realize how much static we took back then. You talk about when I started school, gosh, in the 50s or so, there was still a lot of anti-Mexican rhetoric going on.
yeah.
And I've seen it in books, little books about Texas where they, criticize us, call us grazers and all that stuff. So it was tough
Yeah,
back then. People don't realize, and just like I never went to school with Mexicans or blacks.
yeah,
The year I graduated in '64, the year afterwards, our school was integrated. So it was tough being a Mexican in Texas. I mean, we took a lot of heat.
I can't. Was it? You see, I can't relate, obviously, because I grew up at a different time. But was it like, did people really talk down to you because they really meant it, or were they joking? Like, as you got older, they would make Hispanic jokes. Of
Yeah,
course, I'm a pretty big guy. Nobody usually, give me a hard time about being
yeah.
Hispanic. But was it meanness? I mean, would they be like they
It's,
really look
it's
down on
both.
you?
Some, especially in school, some it was, and of course, I don't. Of course, I think I was kind of naive. They come up and push you around and say, "Remember the Alamo,"
Oh well,
and
okay. No, that's it. Yeah, but
it,
for me, the things that hit the hardest, we saw a couple movies. We saw the Kevin Costner movie with the boys that ran the cross country, and then we went to the
yeah,
theater, and
yeah.
saw the one about the golfing, and you had mentioned to me, which you never mentioned before, about seeing the sign that was up somewhere. It said, "No, no Mexicans, niggers, or dogs."
Right.
How do you react when you walk up and see that?
Well, it was kind of confusing to me, especially when I'd go to Dallas because that's
Yeah,
where it was, and they'd say black and white, and I thought, well, I'm neither. What did I
yeah.
do?
Well,
So
when they had
I
the
took the black. I
Oh,
mean the
did you?
white.
The
I
white,
said, yeah.
okay. But nobody ever said anything. Like there wasn't a monitor or anything that said that.
Well, no, but like I said, it was a white world back then,
Yeah.
and so that you.
But how do you react when you see it? I mean, people today, and we're straight up. You and I talk about politics. We talk about racism. We talk about the whole thing about other people, but they have no idea. This whole thing when people talk about racism gets on my nerves to know that you literally witnessed, the different bathrooms, you witnessed a sign that would say something
Hmm.
like that. How in the world did you, when you looked at it, what did you think? You were put up, black people, Mexican people were put up there with dogs.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's horrible.
Even back then they'd make a joke about, when if a dog bit a Mexican, they'd cut the Mexican's head off, send it off, make sure it didn't have rabies.
Oh my
But
goodness.
but like I said, even now, you think about it, you can't talk about different races
Hmm.
or culture, you get in trouble. But Mexicans kind of been always,
Open game.
open season
Yeah,
for
it
them.
has
They can
been
say,
open season.
make fun of them, ridicule them,
It,
whatever,
but
but nobody says anything about
the
it.
name, would get me some people saying stuff to me when I was younger, but I think I passed for white, for the most
Yeah.
part. But it only bothered me because I just thought it's ignorance to me. But as I got older, I didn't care. I didn't care what anybody would say because I think it's ridiculous to even worry about it. You can't help what you are, and it doesn't make you less. But I can't. The people today, when they start complaining about racism, especially as much as you hear it, it infuriates me to know they didn't have to deal with anything like that. They have no idea. And when they talk about when being poor or whatever, and I think about all you told me about, and Uncle Ross, and I'll talk about how poor you guys were. And I'm like, these people have no idea. You can go get food anytime you
Yeah.
want. I mean, really, there's people that help you. There's things that I don't think they would let people live in those conditions anymore.
Yeah, well, of course, again, you talk about being helped. I don't know if there was welfare or not, but it probably was. Of course, my daddy would never
I don't know if
accept
there was at
welfare.
that time.
Well, I know when I was in junior high, and it must have been the people that we worked for because they were pretty influential. They had a business and they were upper class people. Somehow or another, they told me that I had a lunch ticket
Mm-hmm.
one semester,
Yeah.
and every year I forget. But anyway, I never forget. I'd go up there and I'd tell the lady that took the money. I said I've got a lunch ticket, and I have never gotten out of my mind the way she would look at me
Yeah.
when I did that,
Yeah.
and that really bothered me. And I didn't get it next year, and I was glad because I
Yeah.
just didn't want to put that.
Okay.